The first Germans to set foot in America were probably the explorers and adventurers of the 17th century. As we know, Christopher Columbus was not actually the first European to reach the Americas because the Vikings had established a settlement in Newfoundland around 500 years before Columbus arrived. However, they left no descendants in North America. The first Europeans who did leave descendants were the Spanish, the French, and the English. But there were also a few Germans along the way. After the discovery of the New World, many German explorers and adventurers traveled to North America, including Sebastian Munster, who reached Florida in 1528, and Ferdinand Magellan, who landed in the Philippines after circumnavigating the globe. It is believed that some Germans also fought in the American Revolutionary War, including Baron von Steuben, who became a major general in the Continental Army. But these early Germans were mostly explorers, soldiers, or adventurers, and their impact on the development of the United States was relatively limited. The first large-scale immigration of Germans to the United States began in the 18th century. In 1709, a group of about 1,400 German settlers arrived in Philadelphia. They were followed by other groups of settlers over the next few decades. Most of these immigrants were from the region that is now Germany, and they came to the United States for economic reasons. They were mostly farmers who were attracted to the vast amounts of cheap land in the American colonies. During the colonial period, most German immigrants settled in what are now the states of Pennsylvania, New York, Virginia, and North Carolina. They spoke a language that was a mixture of German, English, and Dutch, and they often intermarried with the local population. Although most German immigrants were farmers, there were also a small number of artisans, merchants, and soldiers. For example, some German immigrants served in the French and Indian War, which was a conflict between the British and the French for control of North America. After the war, the British government offered land to the German immigrants who had fought on the British side. This led to the creation of several German settlements in the western part of Pennsylvania. Despite facing some discrimination from the English-speaking population, the German immigrants were able to maintain their culture and language. They founded schools, churches, and newspapers in German. And despite being outnumbered, they were able to elect several German-speaking representatives to the colonial assemblies. With the outbreak of the American Revolution, most German immigrants sided with the Patriots. This was partly due to the fact that they resented the discrimination they had faced from the English-speaking colonists. But it was also due to the fact that they were attracted to the ideals of liberty and democracy that were espoused by the revolutionaries. Many German immigrants served in the Continental Army, including Christian Friedrich von Steuben, who helped to train the army, and Baron von Steuben, who was a major general at the Siege of Yorktown. As we have seen, the first large-scale immigration of Germans to the United States began in the 18th century, but this was only the beginning. In the 19th century, millions of Germans would immigrate to the United States. So now let's talk about that. In the first half of the 19th century, about 600,000 Germans arrived in the U.S. The first wave of immigrants came in the 1820s and 1830s. At that time, Germany was going through a period of political and social upheaval. The Napoleonic Wars had just ended, and the German states were in a period of transition. Many Germans were also becoming increasingly aware of their national identity, and this led to a growing desire to leave Germany and settle in a land where they could be free to speak their language and practice their religion without interference from the government. The United States seemed like the perfect place for these immigrants. During the first half of the 19th century, the U.S. was a land of opportunity. The Industrial Revolution was transforming the American economy, and there was a growing demand for labor. The United States was also a refuge for political dissidents and religious minorities. And so it is not surprising that so many Germans decided to come to the United States during this time period. These immigrants were mostly young men who were single. They came to the United States with little money and few possessions. Most of them worked as farm laborers or industrial workers. They lived in cities such as New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. The second wave of German immigration took place in the 1840s and 1850s. This was largely due to the revolutions of 1848, which swept across Europe. These revolutions were aimed at ending the rule of the monarchs and establishing new governments based on democratic principles. Although the revolutions ultimately failed in Germany, many Germans continued to believe that it was possible to create a more perfect world. And so they decided to leave Germany and start anew in the United States. These immigrants were also fleeing the economic crisis in Germany. In the 1840s, Germany experienced a severe economic downturn. This led to widespread poverty and unemployment. Many Germans could no longer afford to live in Germany, and they were forced to seek a better life elsewhere. The United States seemed like the perfect place for these immigrants. By this time, the U.S. economy was booming and there was a growing demand for labor. The United States was also a land of political asylum. And so it is not surprising that so many Germans decided to come to the United States during this time period. These immigrants were mostly poor and uneducated, and they had little choice but to work as unskilled laborers. They lived in cities such as New York, Boston, and Chicago, and often lived in terrible conditions. Despite the hardships they faced, these immigrants were able to preserve their culture and language. They founded schools, churches, and newspapers in German. They also played an important role in the labor movement in the United States. Many German immigrants were among the first members of the Knights of Labor and the American Federation of Labor. They fought for better working conditions and higher wages. Although they faced a lot of adversity, German immigrants were able to make significant contributions to the United States. They helped to build the railroads and factories that made the United States into an industrial powerhouse. They also helped to grow the economy of the United States. German immigrants were also very entrepreneurial, and they started many businesses that became very successful, despite the many contributions they made to the United States. German immigrants were often treated very poorly. They were often discriminated against by the native-born Americans, and they were stereotyped as being un-American, despite the hardships they faced. German immigrants were able to succeed in the United States. Many of them became very wealthy, and they were able to preserve their culture and language. So we can see that the first waves of German immigrants to the United States were mostly young men who were single and poor. They came to the United States in search of economic opportunity and political asylum. Although they faced many hardships, they were able to contribute greatly to the development of the United States, and they were also able to preserve their culture and language. But this is not the whole story, because in the 20th century, another wave of German immigrants would arrive in the United States. So now let's talk about that. After World War II, many Germans were eager to leave the country. The war had caused widespread destruction, and people were looking for a fresh start. Many Germans also wanted to escape the Soviet occupation zone. The Soviets had imposed a communist regime on this zone, and many Germans saw this as a threat to their way of life. The United States offered a chance to escape communism and start a new life in a democratic country. In addition, the U.S. government actively encouraged German immigration after the war. The U.S. was still suffering from the effects of the Great Depression and aided workers to help rebuild the economy. The U.S. also wanted to help prevent the spread of communism and saw German immigrants as a way to do this. As a result, many German immigrants were able to enter the United States relatively easily after World War II. Once in the United States, these immigrants faced a number of challenges. Many of them were poor and uneducated and had difficulty finding work. They also faced discrimination from native-born Americans who saw them as foreigners. Nevertheless, German immigrants were able to make significant contributions to American society. They helped to rebuild the U.S. economy after the Second World War, and they also shared their culture and traditions with the American people. Today, there are about 4 million Americans who claim German ancestry. German immigrants have made significant contributions to American culture and society. Many of them have become successful entrepreneurs and business leaders. Others have made important contributions to science, art, and literature. Overall, German immigrants have been a positive force in American society and have helped to make the United States the great nation it is today. So, from the first explorers and adventurers of the 17th century to the millions of immigrants who came in the 19th and 20th centuries, Germans have played an important role in the history of the United States. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next video.